Robert Berdella, often referred to as the Butcher of Kansas City, was an American serial killer and torturer who gained notoriety for his gruesome crimes in the 1980s. Here's detailed information about his life and the horrific acts he committed. Early life and background. Robert Andrew Berdella Jr. was born on January 31, 1949, in Cuyahoga Falls, Ohio. He grew up in a middle-class family and later attended college. He worked as a chef and also pursued interests in art and antiques. The murders and torture. Berdella's crimes took place between 1984 and 1987 in Kansas City, Missouri. He is known to have abducted, tortured, and murdered at least 6 young men. Berdella lured his victims, often vulnerable individuals he met in local bars, with promises of companionship, drugs, or money. Once in his home, Berdella subjected his victims to horrific acts of torture, including sexual abuse, prolonged confinement, and sadistic experiments. He kept detailed journals documenting his actions, providing a disturbing insight into his twisted mindset, discovery, and arrest. Berdella's crimes began to unravel in April 1988, when one of his potential victims, a young man named Chris Bryson, managed to escape from Berdella's home. Bryson reported his ordeal to the police, leading them to Berdella's residence. Upon searching Berdella's house, investigators discovered evidence of his crimes, including photographs, diaries, and human remains. The remains were found in various stages of decomposition, and it was clear that the victims had suffered immensely before their deaths. Legal proceedings and conviction. In July 1988, Berdella was charged with multiple counts of murder, sodomy, and other related charges. He initially pleaded not guilty, but later changed his plea to guilty in exchange for a life sentence without the possibility of parole. He avoided the death penalty by cooperating with the prosecution and providing information about his crimes. Death and legacy. Robert Berdella was serving his life sentence at the Missouri State Penitentiary. However, he never served his full term. On October 8, 1992, Berdella died in prison due to a heart attack. Berdella's heinous crimes and the extent of his sadistic acts shocked the nation. His case raised questions about how someone could commit such horrific acts and maintain a facade of normalcy in society. Berdella's actions continue to be studied by psychologists, criminologists, and law enforcement professionals to gain insights into the mind of a serial killer and to prevent similar tragedies in the future. Couple of theories that have been proposed to explain what might have driven him to commit such horrific acts. 1. Power and control. One theory suggests that Berdella's actions were driven by a need for power and control over his victims. The sadistic torture and prolonged suffering he inflicted on his victims indicate a desire to dominate and exert authority. Berdella may have experienced feelings of inadequacy or powerlessness in his personal life, and his crimes could have been a way for him to temporarily assert control and dominance over others. 2. Sadistic pleasure and gratification. Berdella's extreme acts of torture and sexual abuse could have been motivated by a need for sadistic pleasure and gratification. He might have derived sexual arousal and satisfaction from inflicting pain and suffering on his victims. This theory suggests that the intense physical and psychological torment he subjected his victims to could have been a source of pleasure for him, leading him to repeat these acts. 3. Escalating fantasies. Serial killers often exhibit a pattern of escalating fantasies that evolve over time. It's possible that Berdella's crimes were driven by increasingly elaborate and disturbing fantasies that he felt compelled to act out. As his fantasies intensified, he may have found it necessary to engage in more extreme acts to fulfill his desires, leading to a cycle of escalating violence. 4. Psychological disturbances. Berdella's crimes are often attributed to underlying psychological disturbances. He might have suffered from personality disorders, such as antisocial or narcissistic traits, that contributed to his lack of empathy and remorse. Additionally, He might have experienced a detachment from reality or a distorted sense of morality that allowed him to justify his actions to himself. 5. Control over fear. Some theories suggest that individuals who engage in sadistic and violent acts do so to conquer their own fears and anxieties. Berdella's ability to exert control over his victims in a life-and-death situation could have been a way for him to manage his own fears by putting others in a position of vulnerability. It's important to note that these theories are speculative and based on psychological and criminological perspectives. The true motivations behind Robert Berdella's crimes may never be fully understood, as the complex interplay of psychological, environmental, and personal factors that contribute to such behavior can be challenging to unravel. Some interesting facts about Robert Berdella. Artistic pursuits. Berdella had an interest in art and antiques. He often visited local art galleries and even owned an art shop at one point. This contrast between his artistic interests and his horrific crimes adds an eerie dimension to his personality. Journals and documentation. Berdella meticulously documented his crimes in journals and photographs. These records provided insight into his disturbing mindset and the sadistic acts he inflicted on his victims. Prolonged torture. Berdella's victims endured prolonged and agonizing torture before their deaths. The brutality of his crimes shocked both law enforcement and the public. Lure of drugs. Berdella often used the promise of drugs or money to lure his victims into his home. Once there, they became trapped in his horrifying ordeal. Decomposition and disposal. Berdella stored the bodies of his victims in his home for various periods of time, allowing them to decompose. He later dismembered and disposed of the remains in different locations. Chris Bryson's escape. Chris Bryson, one of Berdella's potential victims, managed to escape in April 1988 after enduring days of torture. His courage in reporting his ordeal led to the unraveling of Berdella's crimes. Cooperation with authorities. Berdella provided information and details about his crimes in exchange for a plea deal that spared him from the death penalty. His cooperation allowed investigators to gain insights into the nature of his crimes. Media and public interest. Berdella's case garnered significant media attention due to the horrifying nature of his crimes. The shock and disbelief surrounding his actions captured the imagination of true crime enthusiasts. Butcher of Kansas City nickname. Berdella earned the moniker Butcher of Kansas City due to the gruesome dismemberment and disposal of his victims' remains. Impact on criminal profiling. Berdella's case contributed to the understanding of criminal profiling and the motivations behind serial killers who engage in sadistic acts of torture. His actions are often studied by criminal psychologists to better understand the minds of such individuals. Psychological evaluation. Berdella underwent psychiatric evaluation and experts diagnosed him with personality disorders that contributed to his lack of empathy and ability to commit heinous acts. Reactions of neighbors. Berdella's neighbors expressed shock upon learning about his crimes, as he had portrayed himself as a friendly and unassuming member of the community. Robert Berdella's case is a haunting reminder of the capacity for human cruelty and the complexities of criminal behavior. His actions continue to be studied and discussed in the context of understanding the motivations behind serial killers and the nature of their crimes. Thank you for joining us in this exploration of the intriguing tale. If you enjoyed this video and found the information fascinating, we encourage you to hit that subscribe button so you won't miss out on more engaging content.